you can find the KOP Mentoring Network Facebook page and start scrolling through it. It'll get you very inspired to help, seeing all the programs and activities that C. Ron and his group of volunteers are putting together for these kids all the time. C. Ron, could you tell me why you started this in 1988? What was your mission?
Jim, let me thank you very much for this opportunity to share with your listeners on Talk with Jim, a slice of the work that we've been doing in our community. This is our 34th year or so, and as a reporter, I was covering the cop beat, and I just got tired of seeing the number of boys who were in the police blotter and the court system. Back then, we obviously couldn't name the kids, but we knew kids were getting in trouble. And many of these kids looked like me. And had there been a positive role model, male role model in their lives, many of this would have been prevented.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember going up to the judge and saying to him, I said, we got to do something about this. Otherwise, it's going to continue and never stop. And I remember him saying, Mr. Allen, you have more power than I do. The pen is more powerful. He said, I have the sentencing guidelines I must go by. You have the pen. And he gave me the number to our good friend Jim in Delray Beach, Charles Chuck Kilgore. He was the chief of police, very interesting character back then. And I met with him. I remember going to his office. I met with him quite a few times. And this time, though, I shared the same story with him about the boys. And I remember him saying that my job is to arrest these suckers, not rehab them. And I said, look, do you mind if I work with some of your guys? And he said, I don't care what they do on their time. But on the clock, they will protect the residents of Delray Beach. And the conversation went on. Anyway, I saw one of the officers in town, Officer Rod Payne, good old Rod Payne, and I spoke to him about it. And he said, yes, I'm down. And we started, Rod Payne, the late Judge Rogers, Edward Rogers, and I started meeting with three boys who went to, back then, Old Carver Middle School. And they hadn't reached the threshold. Of going over the edge. But they could have been averted. And we started meeting them on Saturday mornings, and we met at the old fire station on Atlantic Avenue, where the tennis center is now. And can't say enough thanks to Chief Kerry Cohen. Chief, if you're out there.
Oh, the fire chief, right? The fire chief?
Yeah. He was one of those guys who had a heart. He had a caring heart for people, just a great human being, just like you, Jim. But Chief Cohen said, I'm sure you can meet here. We met in the corner on Saturday mornings. And we met, but mostly we were picking up papers on the strip. And then that it defeated the purpose of what we wanted to do. So we said, I remember Judge saying, son, why don't you bring your homework so we can do some homework on Saturday morning? And guess what? That became more punitive because, man, we had to do homework Monday through Friday and then on Saturday morning. But you know what, guys? With us doing homework on Saturday morning, grades started improvement because there's a correlation somehow that when you do homework, your grades improve.
Who would have thought it?
Oh.
Great. Yeah.
Where were you when I was in high school?
Tell me about it. Grades started improving, and after grades, then self-esteem started improving, and conduct started improving. And I remember back then, I worked Sunday through Thursday shift then, Jim, and on Friday mornings, I would go to traffic court in the old courthouse in Delray. They had traffic courts back then, and I would meet with the police officers. I'd see them. I remember back then, for those who don't know, Interstate 95 didn't have the barricades in the middle. They had grass. Remember that, Jim?
Yep, the
medians.
Yep.
Yes. And I remember going up to a few state troopers back then and saying, hey, man, instead of making left turns, why don't you make a right turn one day at Atlantic and come down to Carver and help us with these kids? And sure enough, he took me up on it. Dwight Walton, he's now long retired. Dwight Walton and the late Savine Stewart, were state troopers. And they would come down to to Old Carver Middle School and meet with these kids. And then they started, it was a Dunkin' Donuts had just came to Delray shortly before then. and they would bring smoothie and bran muffin for the kids. And I remember the kids would say, "Hey, they're bad. Why are you, Matthew Minshew, Angel Ramirez, and another young man, would always say, why they're bad? Why are you bringing that?" And I remember Dwight said, "They're part of the team. They're part of the gang." And then everybody wanted to be a part of the gang.
Ah,
And yes, hey, the Pied Piper.
right.
And by the way, let me just add that I'm of a darker pigmentation than Jim. And none of these kids none of these kids are very much darker hue, but none of these kids look like me, by the way, the original kids we worked with. What was so interesting, though, we went from 3 to 9 in no time. And today, in our 34th year, we have graduated over 4,000, not 400, 4,000 young men from this program. Just a few days ago when Jim and I spoke about this, I just started going through the records. And my team and I, who some have been with me for 21 years, 25 years, and 17 years, we started looking at the number of our yearbooks, and I realized some of the young men who, and I say young men because back then we were only serving boys back then, some of the young men who came through the program. And I run across people in the street. "Mr. Searon, I came through your program." And I remember faces, but the names I don't remember so much. But we have had over 4,000 young men and young ladies now to come through our program through one of our graduations. It's a beautiful thing. And I've served, by the way, let me just add, I've served more than 40,000 through indirectly, through our programs, such as the Thanksgiving turkey program that we have, the back to school drive, the Christmas toy giveaway. And those are not just your normal programs. Those are events back when we did it back then. Because back then, let me just add for those who are listening, IBM was around back then. So we had a lot of support from IBM workers. And we had a lot of support from old retired educators. They're long gone on to glory. For many of those retired educators, Mr. Pompey, Mrs. Pompey.
Oh my gosh,
they're long.
yes.
Yeah, Miss Athelone Brailford, bless her heart, she's still around. Louise King, Rose Thomas, those ladies were out there Saturday mornings at Pompey Park helping us with Operation Save the Children back then. That's the name of the program back then. They would come out every Saturday morning to work with these kids as it morphed through the years.